Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. I can see you all beginning to come in, so it's great to have you with us. I hope you are all keeping safe and well and warm this morning. I have a very disappointing, icing, sugar dusting here, but hope some of you have some better snow where you are. My name is Failte Stoney, and I'm going to be your host for today's session. As usual, if you can hear us okay, if you can see the slides, somebody might just pop on the chat and let us know that it's all working for you guys as attendees. That's brilliant. Thanks, Anthony. Thanks, Marina. Fantastic. So welcome to our first webinar of 2021. Welcome back to those of you who would have joined us throughout 2020. I know some of you joined us for the first time at our Employer Branding Summit a couple of weeks ago, so it's brilliant to have you back with us today. We are joined by my colleague Jim Flynn and two of our Great Place to Work expert panelists this morning. So we've got Sharon from Failte Ireland and Patrick from Codex will be doing the official intros in a little bit. I'm just going to do some very brief housekeeping and some kind of messages from us, and then we'll jump right into the content. So as usual, we'll aim to be wrapped up within the hour, kind of wrapping up at 11 a.m. The slides and the recordings will be available afterwards. And you guys are participants this morning. So, we really encourage you to engage, pop your questions in. We're going to have a couple of polls, a couple of questions going out to you too. So we'd love to see your participation in that. All right, so tomorrow, thanks to the team in Great Place to Work, mainly Anthony and Marina, we have the COVID-19 response or the Irish Workplaces response to COVID-19 booklet coming out. So keep an eye in your inboxes for that. It's going to be showcasing kind of a range of practices from Irish organisations. So do keep an eye out for that. Our next event is going to be on February 22nd, so not too far away at all. And we're going to be talking about how we build trust remotely, both within managers and teams generally. Cathal Divley is going to be leading that session. He's going to be joined by Colin Hughes of TU Dublin and John Brennan, the CEO of ORS as well. So keep an eye out for invites for that coming in the next couple of days. And then obviously we're busy internally preparing for the Best Workplaces Digital Awards this year. It's going to be on March 10th in conjunction with the Irish Times. So all go internally for us, but just wanted to share that with you while we had you all with us this morning. Okay, so I'm just going to do a kind of a very broad scene set to get us going, and then we'll jump into the content. So when we talk about values, a couple of things that might be useful to keep in mind as we run through this morning. The first is, I suppose, what are they as opposed to something that maybe sit on a wall or something a bit intangible. And how we like to think about values are enablers of your culture. So, just because you don't have them doesn't mean they don't exist. Just because you haven't codified your culture doesn't mean it's not there. So there's definitely kind of a good theme that's going to come out today around how we can develop and capture our values, and then how we can kind of live them moving forward. And the next piece then to think about is role modeling. So everybody in your organization, from leadership right down to employee level, has the opportunity to role model the values that exist within your organization and use them to really guide their actions. And this is going to have an impact on key stakeholders, both internally across your business, but also externally, clients, customers, all of that kind of stuff as well. Really key thing when it comes to living your values is actually what measurement you have in place. How do you know they're having an impact? How do we know they're being successful? So what are those key metrics and how can we get in underneath those? And then the final piece is all around that evidence. So when we know what our measurements are, when we know what our impacts are, we can begin to kind of build that evidence base around how our values impact our culture, impact our strategy, impact our decision making, and really allows us to have that authentic conversation around, yes, this is us living our values. Again, as opposed to something that maybe sits pretty on a wall and that we don't refer to that often. Okay. So final piece from me then is just, we've taken an example of an organization's values. So communication, respect, integrity, and excellence. We're going to come back to these at the end of the session. But what I'd encourage you all to do now is take a guess. Who do we think these values, which organization had these values? Again, like I said, we're going to come back to them at the end, but if anybody wants to put their neck out and have a think about who it is that they think these values might be representing, we'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Okay, So it is my real pleasure to invite Patrick Murphy, who is the CEO of Codex Office Solutions, to be our first speaker today. So Patrick is a second generation CEO within Codex. It's a family-owned business where he's worked for most of his life. He's done an MBA in business administration in Smurfit, and he did that while he was working as the director of operations in Codex. And one of the kind of key things for Patrick is bringing education and learning together, and is currently at the INSEAD Director's course in Paris. He's also, we found out this morning, a whiz in PowerPoint. So I'm going to stop sharing my PowerPoint and let Patrick share his screen. And if anybody wants to join Patrick's masterclass in PowerPoint, I'm sure that's going to be coming to your screen soon. But yeah, Patrick, without further ado, over to you.
Great, thanks, Mania.
No
I wouldn't
worries.
quite go that far now with the whiz. You got it up and running anyway. Can you see the screen there anyway?
Can indeed, yeah, perfect.
Sorry, let me just move one or two things around. Suppose just to start by thanking Fanny and the Great Place to Work team for the opportunity to present the journey that we've gone through in relation to building, growing and living our organizational values here at Codex. I think it's our 6th year in the Great Place to Work, Fania, putting you under pressure there. But you know, we're learning all the time. To me, putting the values in place for 2021 has been one of the most rewarding aspects of the Great Place to Work we've done to date. I think out of everything that we've done, it's the one that has maybe made us take the biggest step back and evaluate, you know, holistically how we're approaching business and what we're all about. So it's been really rewarding, really interesting. You know, we're only starting it. Like it's a long journey doing this as a process, but like it's been really good, and I'm really excited to see what 2021 and going forward that it brings to the organization. Start with a little, I suppose, just a background of just myself and Codex, just to set the scene of what we're about. So Codex is a family business. It was set up by my father in 1979, who through his own experience saw an opportunity in the marketplace to bring better service than what was being offered currently. It's grown from strength to strength and progressed a bit from the uniforms that you see here in the picture. We've modernized a bit since then. And the days of when my father started the business, he was doing deliveries in the back door of some businesses, and then taking off the woolly jumper and going in the front door with the suit doing the sales pitch in through the front door. So we've come a long way in the 40 years in business. So and again, we're really looking forward, me coming on as CEO in 2019, I'm really looking forward to the opportunities and building the next 40 years with the team. So what we do, we're the market leader, provider of office supplies and services to the Irish market. We deal with B2B, so we deal with other companies, with other businesses. And our focus being building long-term relationships with the customers and look to see where we can really add value to their procurement and to the day-to-day running of their business. Like we talk about partnerships a lot, like that is Codex's aim, is to build partnerships with other businesses and work alongside them. Our customers, I suppose, scale. Our customers range from government, HSEs would be one of our biggest customers, to, you know, big corporate, the Boston Scientifics of the world, to, you know, SMEs, and to, like, you know, I'm sure now that we're doing this presentation, maybe some of the Great Place to Work members will actually see that they deal with Codex in one way or another. From a Codex point of view, naturally it's been a very challenging year for us. The pivot to remote working, you know, both internally within Codex, but many of our customers pivoting to remote working. You know, our bread and butter is, from a business point of view, is servicing offices and servicing businesses in their workplace. So that has obviously been a huge change for us, with a lot of businesses closed and that move to remote working. But I'll keep on coming back to it. A lot of the good stuff that we've done in our values and building our values, I think will really stand to us within the challenges. You know, we're going to have to pivot. We're going to have to look at new things, but the value, the work that we've done in our values, I think gives us that structure, no matter opportunities or challenges, for us to you know, to have a guiding way of how we're going to approach any challenges or opportunities in the future. Interesting slide, I think, highlighting some of the key moments since we were founded in 1979. And I think interesting in the context of this presentation, if you focus on this, a lot of activity over the last 7-8 years. We winning up big contracts or a number of acquisitions. We bought over one of our largest competitors, Codex Office Supplies, in 2015. We took over Staples Ireland in 2018, sorry. And in the last 8 years, we've doubled our sales to over 30 million euro going forward. I suppose for me, well, that's been fantastic. Like, it's a great news story. It's great for us as a business. All this activity to me, is put pressure on with increased sales, increased activities, put pressure on obviously us upholding the values that were maybe inherently in the Codex DNA from when it was started up. So, I think it was a really good time for us to start to look at this as a process. Just before I go on into just maybe the why now of why we're looking at our values now and just going through that process, I just thought it'd be interesting maybe just to engage people on the call, just to, if you'd asked me 2 years ago what our values were at Codex, I maybe wouldn't have been able to give a straight answer. Even now, the way we're going forward is in the values that we will have will inform how we make a large amount of our decisions, both as a team and as a business. So before I go into our journey about values, I thought it'd be interesting to ask, where other people were in their journey in the values. I think for the process, to me, one of the big learnings for this process to work, you have to be really honest about where you are in the journey. So I think Marina has a poll there that you might send out, just in other words, to ask yourself where you are in the journey. To me, you have to acknowledge, where you are, and including in that, you have to acknowledge where your failings are and where the challenges are you have of implementing values well within your business. So that would be, I suppose, a big learning for us, and not just that being that little bit honest with yourself of where you are in that journey. So it'd be interesting to see, I suppose, from the feedback from members on where they are in that.
Do you want me to give you a sense of that, Patrick, what people have come back with?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. So we've got 53% of people saying they have their company values and the team make sure that they live by them in everything that they do. So the majority kind of saying that they're there. A third saying they have company values, but they couldn't tell you what they were, right? So they're sitting somewhere, but wouldn't be sure what they are. 10% don't have values, but keen to introduce, and then only 3% don't have them at all, and kind of no plans there. So kind of an interesting mix, actually.
Yeah, it certainly is. And I mean, if I had answered, I would have said 2 years ago, I said where we would have been at, I would have been probably, saying that you have values and then actually really living them as a business. I think there's a huge step up in it. And I mean, that's what we're really trying to do with this. I mean, we've always had things like we're customer first, we're customer service at the core of what we do. But, when you really start to write down that, what does that mean in every aspect of the business, you have a different way of looking at things for you to really live it as a business. So I just think with yourself, with anyone doing this, it's just the honesty relating to that. And it's where you want to go with the values within the business, and if you really want it to be built into your DNA and how you approach things. So why now? From why look at the values now within the business? I suppose me taking on the role of CEO, I wanted to bring my own management style to the running of the company. Started by bringing on some new talent into our senior management team internally and externally, which was a fantastic jolt of energy to the company. I think it became clear in that when we were doing it, for us to manage effectively as a senior management team, that we needed to review our core values for us to really work together as a team. A lot of the questions of the senior management team is, what are we really about on that senior level? The management team itself, from the experience that they brought from other businesses, it was really refreshing to say for them to give feedback of what worked well within other businesses they work and what didn't work well. And obviously then that aided the discussion of how we'd approach our values in 2021. Just touching on the brand piece, we've Emily McKenzie, who's our fantastic head of marketing, who's on this call today. When she was asking, I think Emily put the focus on the link between the Codex brand and the values. And if we're going out to the market, how important it is that we have that link in everything that we say about Codex, linking that brand between the values. So in other words, what are we saying about Codex as a brand, inherently linking that with the values that we were putting in place as a business. To me, the challenging year that we've all had, in relating to COVID, the big decisions that had to be made, to me, even the biggest decisions is Codex is asking, is me or the team asking why, particularly in COVID, some of the really hard decisions that we make, well, where do they fit in line with our values? And there was hard decisions to make in 2020, and I'm sure there will be in this year as well. So in other words, are you staying true to the values even when it's the really, really tough decision? So to me, I wanted to have our values really something that I believe in, so that I know when we have to make them big, tough decisions, that I felt comfortable with them, in my role. Learning from past attempts, I think one of the things I touched on there is the honesty, being honest in where you are as a business with relation to the values. I think we'd all maybe be guilty of the values, throwing values into the end of the discussion. Something I've learned from this is the values should be at the start of the discussion. The values should lead the strategy, not the other way around. We're all guilty of that as an opportunity shows itself, and you go with it, as opposed to saying okay, hold on, is that in line with our values? So I think that's something that we've really learned, and probably learned the hard way in trying some new things that didn't work out as well for us. As I touched on, understanding that the values should answer the why right up to the big decisions. I think to not let the short-term challenges or opportunities, I think maybe the challenges piece is obvious, but the opportunities, as I said, I pointed out Codex, we've had some great opportunities in the last 7-8 years, and we've benefited from that as a business, but the opportunities maybe as well distracted us from the values, and it's to try and keep that balance between any opportunities, that you still take on opportunities in line with your core values, and that you don't lose sight of that, even if there is the end of it, that you try and keep that in line with your core values business. Except that it might take time. It's going to take time, no more than anything you want to do well within a business, it's going to take time. We're really, this year will be the first year where we will really put a lot of, rolling this out across the whole company. It's going to take time to bed it in within the business, and for all staff to really buy into it and see how we're approaching this in 2021 and beyond. But it does take time. It was the first conversations where were in 2019, and it's only by back and forth with the senior management team, with staff, that we've come to this point in time. So it does take time. Involve staff. It doesn't, I think initially, if you're at the initial stages, it can be chewing the breeze. It can be an informal conversation. It doesn't all have to be formal. Like, there's a lot of conversations that go into this, finding a way that suits to you for a business. So, that's a lot of good learnings that we've taken from maybe things not working as well in the past. So introducing, just, as I said, it's a number of years in the making, but it just tried to summarize in a concise way as possible, the journey that Codex on, and just to show the roadmap of how we approached it. As I show here, as in very honest and open about the failings that we'd had in the past. We took and agreed, once we'd it lined up, we did have an agreed approach on how we do it, starting with, we did a number of sessions with the senior management team to determine our values. So we started with the senior management team, and we put it through a third party, and there's no links to, there's no skin in the game in this. I suppose the term crowd we use, Lean Disruptor, they're exceptionally good at this. So we did it independently. We did a few sessions focusing on values with the senior management team. As I said, I'll say it again because they're really, really good. Lean Disruptor, and we've used them right throughout the process. Then when we brought it on a little bit forward, we then started rolling it out. I think we wanted initially for the senior management team to have our head around it. Then we did a survey with all our staff asking for their input into the process when we moved it along. In 2021, we've put it into our business objectives. We're putting it into performance management this year, aspects of it into the performance management to really get buy-in from staff. We're running, we've ran before Christmas staff presentations on it, and this year we'll be doing, we'll be aligning it within our HR, how we're managing it throughout the year. We'll be working it into, as I said, into the day-to-day running of the business with staff. As I said, yeah, and they're in performance management. And I think final piece on this would be, in 2021, even working it into the Great Place to Work plan that we'll put in place this year. So, just all across the business, showing how important it is to all the staff and that it's consistently reinforced, day to day, month to month, year to year, that it's just we keep on reinforcing, obviously, its importance within the business. Values that we put in place, as I said, a lot of work has gone into this on it. To me, the most important aspect is to accept that these values, they're not necessarily where you feel you are at the moment, but where we want to put our focus, where we want to put our resource, and fundamentally where we believe that they will add value to the business. And you have to, with this as well as a business, that if you're going down this route, accept that, that you have to possibly put resource in areas to back it up. You can't say your customer first and then have customers waiting for 2 hours on the phone if they want to contact you. So in other words, you have to, within this, accept that if you're putting these values out, that you have to resource it up and you have to give it the time you need to do it. As I said, you have to as well be open for so sense of belonging. You have to be open that currently within the business that certain people mightn't feel a sense of belonging to the business. So you have to be open to the criticism as well, and to accept, okay, well, that is genuinely how the feeling is within the business, and then build it into your plan for next year or next month, as in how you're going to address that. But it's like, it's not just because you say the value is belonging, doesn't mean that automatically all your staff are going to agree. But what it is that desire to build a better sense of belonging within the business. So, this is a starting point for us, and it's the building blocks, as I would say, for exciting building blocks for us, I suppose, going forward in the coming months and years. Just to I suppose finish on some tips, and from building on obviously from our experience to it, making sure values exist outside of a piece of paper, as I said, incorporating it in everything that you do. I mean, there's so many opportunities when you use it right to incorporate it into the day-to-day running of the business. Continuously review, as I said, be open to feedback, be open to to be open to things not going well. Not maybe, 3 of the values are going well, 2 of them might need a lot of work. Accept the temporary disruption. I think this one is beware that there's, if you really are living your values, you might have to turn down some opportunities because they mightn't fit in line with your business values, and that can mean to the degree of, it might be saying, okay, we turn down that contract that we have with them customers, or we don't look at this opportunity, which can be hard to do. It's hard to say no to certain things if they don't align with their value, but that's the way you have to be thinking. And getting buy-in, as I said, doing it in a way that is engaging, where you're open, you're honest in how you approach, and honest to the point of where you're explaining to staff that there is challenges involved in this. Incorporate into great work as strategy. I think, to me, great place to work is a huge asset for everyone who's involved in it, and to maybe talk with the likes of Fanny and the team about ways we can incorporate it into our great place to work strategy. We're running, for example, an innovation week at the start of March, and to maybe bounce around. I think maybe something that can be done more within the great place to work community is bouncing around things that work and things that don't work within the great place to work organization. So, just something I'd be interested in getting feedback from other members on about what's working, what's not, and even the likes of Vania, just working with her in certain initiatives that we really get things to work well. So, that's, I suppose, Codex's journey in this point. So, leave you.
Yeah, it's brilliant. Thanks so much, Patrick. I really appreciate the kind of the transparency there around kind of your own journey and your own experience and what that's been, and then your kind of your own piece around kind of as a leader wanting to lead out with this, I suppose. And one of the questions that struck me was, how much do you think Codex's values reflect your own values as a leader? Is there an alignment there? Is that something that's kind of had an impact?
I think it is. I mean, I think you have to believe in it. You have to believe in it as a leader, as an organization, that this is core to your beliefs. So I would say that, yes, for it to really work, it has to be something that you believe passionately about. Yeah.
And I have to say, always intrigued by this idea of, because I think a lot of the chat can often be around, we didn't, or this challenge hit the business and we decided to not do it because of this, it wouldn't be in line with our values. But actually this idea of potentially not taking on opportunities, and knowing where the line was kind of drawn on that one. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
I think it's learning from past mistakes possibly in that as well. As in other words, there's loads of good ideas, loads of good opportunities, but I mean, we've learned through maybe things not working as well as we would like, as in where we've said, look, that's an opportunity, and we don't give it the time, or we don't give it the, we don't make sure that it's aligned with all our values. We do everything that we do day to day, we do very well, but sometimes when you step outside your comfort zone, you think it's going to maybe come that little bit easier than it is. And for us as a business, maybe some of the opportunities we worked on in the past, we didn't give it that time, or we didn't make sure we upheld all our values in that part of the process because it was new to us. And I think it's that learning for us. If we're going to do new things, if we're going to pivot to new opportunities, we need to make sure the new opportunities we do that as equally as well as the stuff that we're comfortable with. So I mean, that's probably something that's come just out of things not working as well as we would like in the past.
Yeah, brilliant. We've got a couple of comments coming in from those who are with us here. And actually one from Aoife saying that she was particularly struck from the point around front-ending strategy decisions with values. So they come first and, everything else kind of comes after that, as opposed to here's the strategy. Now, how do we make the values fit in and make this work? That we're really kind of leading out with those values.
I think when you're really comfortable with them, I think that comes that little bit more naturally, but it's only when you're really, really comfortable with that it actually comes.
That it begins to actually kind of be a reality as opposed to something that you would like to have happen type thing. Yeah. And obviously you guys are relatively new in this, right? So values are kind of relatively fresh. There's probably a little bit of kind of excitement and stuff like that and how you're integrating them. Do you guys have a sense of the kind of measurements or metrics you might put in place just to know that you're on track with them and how they're progressing in the organization?
I think it's working them into everything. So in our monthly reviews with staff, that you start to emphasize like the importance of them, and that you pick up examples where we can improve as a business. So in other words, and it's working that into the culture of the company, where you see something that isn't aligned with the values, that it's an okay environment, that you start to say, as in, well, it does that practice or does that comment or thing that we've done, does that align with our values? And that you're trying to build an environment where you're saying, look, if we really believe in this, then we're comfortable enough with saying, look, can we do this better? Can we do this process better to improve the customer experience, which is what we're trying to focus on. I think it's only when you're that comfortable with what you're putting out there as your values that you're able to have them conversations with staff, and then show obviously the benefits of us bringing in better practices in these areas.
Yeah, brilliant. I think one of the pieces that we kind of often get is either organizations who've had maybe a similar value set for a long time or are only going at this for the first time. And actually, I know Helen kind of had popped us a question beforehand around, not making it a decision by committee, like how do you actually get there in that, I suppose, authentic way? And I suppose if somebody was approaching their leadership team about kind of getting this going, is there any kind of specific advice that you'd give them?
I think you have to get your senior management team aligned in what way you want to approach it. I mean, as I said, you need to be clear of what your path of how you're going to approach it as a senior management team before you put it out, because you need to show obviously that there's a plan in how we're approaching this. So as I said, we use Lean Disruptor. I feel like I'm doing a plug there. I'm really not. I just thought they were very helpful in doing it. In that, we went to somebody who was independent who does this, and we brought the senior management team first, and got ourselves in a mindset where we were comfortable enough with them rolling it out to staff and asking for their input onto it. But as I said, you ask people for advice, you talk to different people about it, and if you're not sure, just ask, I suppose, and look for advice on what's the best approach for you.
Yeah, and definitely one of the things that struck me about your piece is like you got to be willing to take on the learnings, be open with it. Not everything's going to work, and it might take a bit of time. But if you're upfront with the expectations around that from the get-go, you're probably setting yourself up for that longer term success, as opposed to, yay, let's do values and let's and it's done and then becomes something that sits on a shelf, as opposed to something that actually gets integrated into the business.
And it says like we've tried different things in the past, but this I just feel it's a different approach in that we're really looking at it holistically, and really asking, like, genuinely what do we want to live by as a business, and it's just, you know, it's been fun to do.
Brilliant. Patrick, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And I know we're going to come back hopefully for a bit more Q&A at the end, but I'm conscious it's time's moving on. So without further ado, I am going to, actually just before I do, there are some answers coming in to who those values were, and we've got a couple of correct answers. Now, somebody did admit to Googling it, which, I mean, I'm very disappointed, Orla, to be honest, but we'll let you go. We'll let you off with it with this stage. But Jim, I'm gonna hand over to you.
Thanks very much, Failte, and thanks, Patrick. Really interesting introduction to our discussion. Very looking forward to moving on to talking with Sharon. Sharon is the head of human resources at Failte Ireland since 2018. She's got a long history in terms of, she's got a master's in industrial relations and HR, and both in the private sector and in the non-for-profit sector, a lot of experience to bring to this whole discussion. So having joined Failte Ireland in 2018, they were on the Great Place to Work journey at that point, and last year were recognised for the first time, and again certified this year as a Great Place to Work. I think much more importantly than all of that, of course, is that Sharon is hails from the wild Atlantic way, Sharon, don't you? And in West Cork, even better again, right? A further upgrade, as you see Skull there in the background. So Sharon, looking forward to hearing about your journey around values and what all that entailed.
Absolutely. Thanks a million, Jim. And I'm delighted to be here this morning. Hope everybody is keeping well. I know it's chilly out there this morning, and we're in a very different place this year than we were last year. But again, we have similar struggles and similar challenges. And I guess this morning I wanted to take the opportunity to share with you our journey and build on what Patrick has shared with you, because Patrick's journey in Codex is quite similar to ours and how we got there. But I wanted to pick up from kind of getting to the stage of agreeing your values, having that consultation with employees as to how we then made them real, how we put values in action. So I'm going to do my best here now and try and share my screen with you.
I can't believe Jim got Cork into the first webinar of 2021. I mean, like, it took us, I think, 4 webinars last year, but no, straight in on the first one this year, Jim. So
absolutely. Okay, so I'm hoping everybody can see that.
Perfect.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so we're good to go. So as I said, I really kind of just wanted to talk about our journey and about how we made the values real. And I suppose the first thing that I'd like to do is just give you a little bit of context about Failte Ireland and actually what we are and what we do. We're the National Tourism Development Authority, and essentially we're a public sector organisation under the aegis of a government department, which is tourism, culture, arts, Gaeltacht, sport and media. So that's a mouthful, but we recently had our department merge with a number of other departments with the government change last year, and now we sit within that department. But I suppose Failte Ireland is a relatively new organisation, having really only been established about 18 years ago, when the former Fort Failte was merged with a number of other organisations such as CERT, and a number of regional tourist authorities. So 9 organisations in total came together about 18 years ago and formed Failte Ireland. And what is our role? I mean, we have a particular role which is about developing and supporting the tourism industry within Ireland. And in doing that, we provide practical business supports in order to help tourism business better manage and market their products and services. So in addition to that, we work with a number of other state agencies and stakeholders to develop positive and practical strategies that will benefit the Irish tourism. But I suppose ultimately it's about contributing to the Irish economy. Part of that obviously is our domestic marketing campaign, not to be confused with Tourism Ireland, who actually have a specific remit around marketing Ireland abroad. And we work very closely with Tourism Ireland, But as I said, their remit is very much about our visitors coming from abroad, whereas Failte Ireland's remit is about developing tourism nationally within Ireland and looking at our domestic marketing. So I'm just going to actually ask Failte to please run a video for us, just to kind of give you a quick overview.
Sharon, I think you're going to have to do the voiceover for the video.
We have no sound. Great.
But it's an extraordinary contribution, isn't it, that Failte Ireland is making in terms of the impact to the economy and the, you know,
yeah. And Grant, okay.
Apologies.
Now no sound. I'll give you the context.
Sorry about that. Not sure what happened.
Visual, so.
No worries. No worries. Are we still able to see my slides?
We'll need you to share them there again, I think.
Okay.
Technology is always our friend, isn't it?
It's great. Never a dull moment. Okay. So hopefully they should be coming back up now again.
But essentially, there are hundreds of thousands of people dependent on tourism in many different ways. In terms of you really facilitate the development of businesses around that. But by developing the product and developing them as businesses, and then giving overarching brands like the Wild Atlantic Way, that's pretty much.
Absolutely. And I guess the purpose of the video there was to kind of give you a sense of what has happened within Failte Ireland and the tourism sector in the last 12 months. Because that ad that showed there, albeit you didn't have the sound, it might be familiar to you because it was launched over a year ago now on the Late Late Show last February. And that was meant to be our new domestic marketing campaign. And within a matter of weeks, we had to pull it. And we had to pull it on the basis of the restrictions and the travel restrictions that came into play as a result of the pandemic. So what we had to do then as an organization was completely and utterly change our strategy for the coming year and how we did business. And I suppose all of the marketing that we had planned to do, we had a number of slots right across various different media that we had to pull. So what we had to do at that stage was going back to our values, which I'm going to talk about now in a moment. We had to see, okay, what would we do about this? So what we decided to do was make those slots available to the HSE. And so a lot of the advertising campaigns you would have seen at the beginning of the pandemic were actually meant to be slots for domestic marketing. So I suppose in a nutshell, we had to completely change what it was we did. And I suppose our values journey then, looking at what our values were, we actually came up with 7 values. Now it's quite a lot. And I suppose we debated long and hard about this at the outset. How do you make values real? And how do people identify with them if you have 7 sets of values? And how do people memorize those? How do they identify with them? But either way, we persevered and decided that actually the 7 values were critical to our business because of how we deliver our business is so broad and so varied that we wanted to keep them. So I guess when we look at those, what I wanted to do then was take you through how we implemented those. And I suppose in looking at this, I was struck by an article in the Harvard Business Review, which was called Make Your Values Mean Something. And for us, that was the critical point. What are our values? What do they mean to everybody within our organization? But more importantly, what do they mean to industry? So looking at the 4 points that Lencioni pointed out was understand your values, be aggressively authentic, own the process, and weave your core values into everything. So given the fact that since last March, everybody in Failte Ireland has been working remotely, and we've been trying to work with tourism sector remotely as well, because we haven't had the opportunity to get out and about, or maybe a month or two during last year, how do we make them real? So I'm going to take you through those 4 points and just give you some of the examples of what we did. So in understanding your values, I was struck again by Patrick's values and how they were laid out. It's really critical that in understanding your values, you have to define what your value actually means. So for example, one of our values is passion. Now, passion can mean anything to a variety of people, and you can have different views as to what that means. But passion for us is that we're passionate about Ireland. So you have to define what your value means. Beneath that as well, and similar to Codex, we have a set of behaviours under each value. Again, it's really critical that people identify with those behaviours, that you can give examples of what that actually means in practice. So what we did was we held employee focus groups, and we looked at the different values, and within that we looked at the behaviours. And it was interesting, actually. It was much easier for employees to identify what behaviours they didn't like or that they didn't want to see within our organisation. And what we did then was we took those and we flipped them on their head and we made positive statements so that this is how we will actually do business. Really important then was to actually take those behaviours and apply them to each division or each specific team within Failte Ireland. So what did those behaviours actually look like? Working in HR, working on the marketing team, working on our brands such as the Wild Atlantic Way, because our behaviours are slightly different on the basis of the type of services that we provide. So it was critical that we went all the way down and delved deeper and deeper into those behaviours so that we could identify with them and understand them better.
And Sharon, you chose, and I noticed that with Patrick as well, you chose not to show the negative, let's say the violation of your values as they were listed in terms of behaviours. Why did you make that choice? Because isn't it sometimes useful to be able to pick out something that isn't in line with values and then highlight that?
It is, absolutely. But again, I suppose initially what we wanted to do was to give the positives, because these are our expectations. These are the behaviours that we expect when you're doing a good job and you're doing what you need to be doing within your role. The flip side of that, however, is we have called out specific values, and I'm actually going to get to that piece in a minute when we talk about hard values, because we have called out specifically what to do if somebody isn't living by the values.
Okay.
So I'm just going to take you on then to the next slide, which is basically be aggressively authentic. So it is important to be authentic with your values. But what I particularly liked about Lencioni is he says be aggressively authentic. So have tough values, call out what you want to do better. So you have the positive slant on it, but you then have to be really tough about what are the things you don't want to see. So for example, one of our values is care. And again, care can be seen to be a nice value to have, a nice fluffy value. But actually, we call out specifically certain behaviours. And one of those we have is that we give constructive feedback. So while we care about people, in caring about people, we do give constructive feedback to each other. And we expect then that we are receptive to constructive feedback. So that's where you have sort of the tough value element, where you have to call out specific things that that you have expectations around, and that, as you say, brings both the kind of the flip side of the positive. Because to be honest with you, if your values are all positive, as you say, Jim, or if they're all kind of fluffy language that people can't necessarily see working on a day-to-day basis, they become hollow values. You have cynical employees, and as a result, those values are not true to your customer. And ultimately, then the service that you're providing isn't resonating. And of course, it's undermining managerial credibility. The next area then obviously is owning the process. Everybody within the organization owns the values. And I suppose that was the message that we gave out over 12 months ago when we launched our new values, was that this was everybody. Everybody owned it. It's not a HR function. It's not a marketing function. It is everybody working together to make sure that we understand them, that we can identify with them, and that we own them. And that the behaviours are developed for the organisation, but then they're distilled right down by team. For us owning the process, it was critical that our senior leadership And again, Patrick referred to this, that our senior leadership and our CEO were also authentic about the values, that they were constantly using the language, constantly giving real examples of what those values actually looked like in practice. And it became natural then to be using it in conversation as part of our every day-to-day work. So values in action remotely. So as I said, last March, Friday the 13th, the offices of Failte Ireland were deserted, and they haven't been occupied since. So for us at the time, we had a wonderful array of marketing assets, whereby we had the fabulous pictures on the wall, we had brochures, we had booklets, you name it, we had it. And we were set to implement our values. And then all of a sudden, everybody was working from home. And we had to think really, really quickly, okay, how do we make this real for people? Because we're not seeing it, the values aren't visible to us on the walls anymore. We're not clear as to what the values are. We had to really very quickly make sure that we were putting them into action so that all of our employees and our industry could see that there has actually been a shift and there has been a change this year as a result of our values. So what we did was, as part of our recruitment and selection, our selection process is aligned to our values. Part of our competency-based interviews is exploring those values, exploring those behaviours. And a piece of work we're undertaking this year is now to align the behaviours we have for our competencies, because we adopted a competency-based interview model, that they are now aligned with our values, behaviours, and that they become one. That it's not, they're not separate. This is what the expectation is if you take a role in Failte Ireland. And that's how we then select. Our employee induction programme obviously went online, and our first module is totally dedicated to values. We also delivered a people management programme very successfully online last year. And in doing that, again, each module was framed under the values, so that the expectations we have of our people managers are, again, through the lens of our values. The language is being used, the examples of how we do our day-to-day work, it's all framed through the values. And again, that language becomes familiar to people, the examples become familiar, we become very clued into it. Our CEO weekly address, which we call Paul Kelly Telly, happens every Friday. And this is where our CEO, Paul, gives weekly updates. But we also then have an opportunity for various different teams and divisions across the organisation to showcase the work that they're involved in. And again, that's done through the language of the values. Here's a great example of collaboration. Here's a great example of integrity. And we start giving examples as to what that looks like. So again, everything that we're doing, we're using the language repetitively, so people are getting really clued into what it is expected. Clearly, our involvement with Great Place to Work has been hugely beneficial to us in this whole area, because it challenges us to think differently. It challenges us to look at how are we going to measure things and how are we going to see the impact of that. And that has been informative to us by looking at our values and seeing how do we make them real. The last two items on the slide there were particularly related to our staff forum. So we have a staff forum who, I suppose, address a number of issues that come up from employees. And they also then look at employee-specific initiatives they introduce from time to time. One of the areas that they were very involved in last year were our values, where they produced a video. And we had 7 different staff actually take a value, and they described what the value meant to them. They described the values, they described the behaviours rather that sat within that value, and then they gave examples. And their question then to the organisation was, do you know somebody who's like this? Do you know somebody who demonstrates these behaviours? And if so, then we introduced the Staff Recognition Awards. And essentially what they were was our peers, our colleagues, nominated people within the organisation that they felt demonstrated action, demonstrated passion, and they had to explain why. What were the behaviours? What did that person do? And what was the impact on our industry as a result? So we had a very successful Staff Recognition Award ceremony last December, where there were 7 awards given. And so that was one person for each value. And the feedback from staff afterwards was quite incredible, because we had recognition awards every year previous, and they didn't have the same impact. This year, because individuals were nominated by their peers, they were nominated under a particular value and their behaviours were called out. It was much more meaningful to them. And again, as I say, the feedback from our staff who were nominated and those who actually won awards was quite incredible because it was all linked to our values. Finally, then, looking at values, and I suppose, how did they support us in COVID-19? As I mentioned at the outset, we as an organisation had to completely change what we did, very similar to probably lots of organisations on the call today. What you set out to do in January or February of last year completely changed. And as an organisation, particularly supporting an industry that, as a result of COVID-19, has been absolutely decimated, we have dealt with very, very difficult situations. And for us, our values have been, I suppose, that glue that have brought us together and have made us think about doing things differently. So I guess our passion for Ireland has really inspired our organisation to constantly reimagine how we would do things differently. What are the supports industry need? And how are they going to flex in order to survive over the coming years? Action. We obviously had quite an amount of work, quite an amount of different types of processes and systems that we had to introduce last year, and we had to do it really quickly. So action became one of our key values. And care. Like most of our organisations, we've really explored that particular value in the last year, where we've cared for our employees, we have sought to support them in remote working, and obviously then from our industry's perspective, how do we reach out remotely and how do we ensure that our care value is front and foremost? So our values really helped us to flex and change, and they kept us engaged and supported. And I guess we have another tough year ahead. This year is looking to be somewhat similar to last year from an industry perspective. But I guess for us, there is light at the end of the tunnel. Building on our values, making them even more real for us, I suppose, gives us that I suppose the passion that we have for Ireland to keep going and to hopefully keep us going through the next year or two, because we do know it is going to be tough, and hopefully, they will continue to keep us grounded.
And Sharon, what's particularly striking, I think, there as well about the work that you've done is it is an investment in the future of work. So not only did it help you getting through these two difficult years, but it sets you up really, really well for this transition to more people working remotely and whatever that flex involves. There's nothing there that you would be leaving behind. Those are all useful action points that you've taken.
Yeah, and look we still have a lot to do because it is about understanding the actions, and it's also realizing that while you may agree upon a set of values for this year, that could be different next year. We need the ability to be able to flex and to change and to respond to our environment and what actually hits us. And that's why we spent a lot of time looking at the behaviors within each of our values, so that we can do that and we can make them real no matter what the circumstances are.
Okay. So I'm just going to move to a couple of summary points, and then we'll take some questions and answers to the extent of which we have time. So we mentioned here at the beginning that these were a set of values, and some of you have quite rightly pointed out that this was related to a company called Inran. For many of you, this is before I'm sure you entered the workforce, but back in 2002, 2001, this was one of the biggest companies in the world who had a great set of values. And they got several awards for innovation. In fact, they were so good at innovation that they innovated very substantially and lost the biggest amount of money lost to date. I think it was something like 70 billion on behalf of investors, lots of people's jobs and lots of people's pensions. And it's just an example of having these kind of nice words that don't mean anything are not there to support to support the business in the long run. I suppose just to kind of pull together some of the things across both discussions, and thanks very much to Sharon and to Patrick. And this is one of the things that comes up to us in terms of what many HR teams say is how to engage a senior team around this discussion. So first of all, this thing of culture and values are almost inseparable. and values are the way we actually measure the application of culture. So they're pretty key, and they're pretty powerful entry point, one of your entry points in terms of whatever way you want to move the culture or change the organization in terms of things like the future work, or adapt to changing market needs, as Sharon has spoken about and Patrick has spoken about, and I suppose harness the full capability of the organization. It's important to remember that you have a set of values, whether or not you make them explicit, whether or not you work on them, whether or not you measure them, whether or not you do any of those things. So just like a personality, I mean, maybe we might be able to argue about this and for certain individuals that we know maybe, but it's impossible not to have values, in that somebody walking in, joining the organization for the first time is going to figure out what's important, is going to figure out what I need to do to get ahead here, what I need to do to be successful here. And that's implicit one way or another. So then by paying attention to this, you get an opportunity to guide it, to bring it out into the open, to make the implicit explicit, to measure it, and to bring it into action. It is a key expression of who you are. And one of the things that we like to see in terms of values, in terms of development, is that it's a reflection of your overall brand, and it's a reflection of your employer brand. So that when I'm selecting myself in terms of the organization that I might join, that I can see something about the values that appeals to me, and that makes you as an employer more attractive and more authentic, and feel like a place that I would fit in and contribute well to. I suppose one of the other sort of key things about values is as we move further and further into more and more of a knowledge economy, where we want people to be accountable, we want people to make decisions on their own accord, we want them to have the power to do that, to treat customers well, to make those kinds of decisions, then the clear values help inform their behavior. So one of the ways of seeing that is exactly as Patrick mentioned, how long a customer might be waiting, or again, as Sharon has mentioned, in terms of that we act, you know what I mean? So different pieces like that. So informing those kinds of decisions. Best practice involves being clear of the impact on all stakeholders. And Patrick and Sharon both mentioned the extent to which it was important that the values delivered for their customer, delivered for the industry, delivered for Ireland. So there's a wide range of measures that are important, and you know, taking into account both the employee voice and the wider industry voice in terms of putting together those values is very much aligned to the best way of doing things. And again, Sharon got into in greater detail this idea of it should inform the entire employee life cycle. So attraction, induction, recognition, development, and promotion are all mentioned in terms of where you might plug in the whole sort of values discussion into the cycle. So some key measures from our point of view. You know, these are types of statements in Great Place to Work that we pay attention to in terms of the overall sort of values piece. And to say to you that some organizations will look at these sort of key metrics in relation to stuff like this, which we would be looking at with Failte Ireland and with Codex, but we're also possible to do an entire value mapping exercise where we could essentially calibrate the application of your values to best organizations in the country, so that you're able to measure that. So those are some thoughts in terms of just pulling this discussion together. I notice, Failte, we're sort of tight on time in terms of questions.
We are, as usual. It is 11 a.m. and it's flown in. But what I do want to do, just to get to a couple of comments that have come in first. Alan from the Crow Park Hotel, Sharon just in particular. So as someone who deals with Failte Ireland regularly, it is great to see them put such focus on culture and people. The team at Failte Ireland give great help and assistance to the industry. And I think that's reflective of a lot of the feedback we would get from the organisations that we work with in the industry. So I just wanted to pass that on while I had the opportunity. There are a couple of questions coming in. What we might do is we might just do some individual follow-up afterwards for people who want to get, I know a couple of people want to know a bit more about the lean disruptors, Patrick, so and how that process worked. But we might take that for kind of a conversation. We'll have that directly with people. And really for me, it's just to say thank you very much. Thank you to Jim for joining me, but in particular, thank you to Sharon and Patrick for your candidness and the amount of openness that you've brought with you today, and really giving that perspective on how organizations can get this going. So thank you very much for that.
Thanks very much, guys. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thanks, Failte.
That's brilliant. Thanks everybody, and thanks everyone for joining us today. Hopefully see you on the 22nd. I'll go. So that's brilliant. Thanks so much, everybody.